no hope of my coming here. He said, somehow or another, Tamal has brought me. And similarly, when Prabhupada came back to Vrindavan, at the beginning of October in 77, and we brought him into his room. I purchased that bed that's in the main room there. We got that from a life member in Delhi. So we set everything up. We brought Prabhupada in. And then practically one of the first things that Prabhupada said was that I'm so grateful to Tamal that he took me to London and brought me all the way back without any difficulty. So there was, some very intimate moments and real, amazing service that Tamal did, and Upendra also. Prabhupada was so pleased with Upendra that he gave him a 10,000 rupee gift, right at the very end, and I think he gave him his wristwatch as well. So there was a lot of, intimate service that was rendered. Prabhupada recognized it all. It was, something that I know I could not have done. I saw Upendra in action, looking after Prabhupada's bodily needs, and although I kind of joined in with him under his direction, but he was expert. He knew exactly what to do. He understood, what Prabhupada needed at every moment. The same with Tamal. So, just.
In taking care of my mother in her last days, like my uncle blamed me for not being able to save her, even though it was similar. It was at a point where she'd had 2 strokes and there was no coming back. And my mother's doctor said that's the natural thing. The person who tries the hardest to take care of the person who tries the hardest to take care of the person, when obviously there's no chance of coming back, the other people tend to blame them for not being able to save them. So it happened with me with my mother. It happened with them. People it happens more often than not that people blame the person who works the hardest.
I have a view of that. That was another reason why it was Tamal that was chosen to be with Prabhupada in the last months, because he was the only one in the society that could handle all the flack that he got afterwards from, foolish and ignorant people that really didn't understand what was really going on. I mean, Tamal was blamed for so many outlandish and wild things. Absolute, really offensive stuff was said. But he took it all and he bore it all because he was a very strong, dedicated Prabhupada man. Just at the last couple of weeks, when the whole controversy about going on parikrama, Prabhupada wanted to go on a bullock cart around Govardhan and visit all the places in Braj. And they knew that, one day, less than 24 hours on the back of a bullock cart, Prabhupada would leave his body for sure. So it became a, huge controversy. And you have, one camp saying, no, Prabhupada wants to die on parikrama. And then you've got Tamal on the other side saying, no, we'll go on parikrama, but not until you got your strength back. So, later on, so many outlandish theories, were developed by people that really didn't understand what was going on in Prabhupada's rooms. But, Tamal took all of that on his head. He knew that he'd done his best. And he told me that during that parikrama episode, it reached a kind of a peak, the debate, the conflict, if you like. And he was up in his room in the guest house with Bhavananda. And they were both, he said he was in extreme anxiety about whether, that Prabhupada may actually be taken out on this bullock cart, and he just couldn't handle it. So he was sitting there, kind of in intense anxiety, and then there was a knock on the door. Prabhupada wants to see you. So he ran, he and Bhavananda, they ran down, and I think Prabhupada's godbrother was there, Akinchana Krishna Das Babaji maybe, and they were talking about this parikrama thing, and then Prabhupada asked Tamal, what do you think I should do? And then Tamal said, don't go. We can go later on when you get a bit stronger, but not right now. It's like suicidal. So then Prabhupada said, all right. He said, then we won't go. He said, if the right hand and the left hand say no, then how can I go? And then Tamal said he had this total relief. And he confided in me that during his entire career in Krishna consciousness, he had never had a moment where he felt like absolute total surrender. You know, he was fully surrendered as much as he could be, but even when you're fully surrendered, the mind is always working, you know, creating mischief. But he said at that moment, he experienced this total, absolute surrender to Prabhupada, where he had no other desire than just, you know, to please him and to serve him. And it was something that he prayed for in his whole devotional career. And at that moment, with this intense debate going on about the parikrama, he experienced that. So, you know, that was his heart. He was fully Prabhupada's man, and that was why he was put in that position. Yeah. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, you answered it perfectly well. I was just, you know, I related to that when I was taking care of my mother and doing everything I could. And, you know, just like my mother's doctor said, the person is in a bad medical condition and they've been deteriorating. And then other people just say, well, let's just see what you did. When it's obviously the medical condition just kept getting worse. But people think, oh, well, let's see what you did, as if you...
Everybody has an opinion.
Yeah.
But as far as Prabhupada was concerned, he was very happy with the way that he was being looked after. You know, as I say, as soon as he got back here, the first thing he thought of, he said, I have to thank Tamal for taking me all the way to London and back without any difficulty. You know, and Prabhupada was immobile at that point, physically. He couldn't do anything. So they managed to do that without any discomfort. He was very, very grateful to him for that. Haripad Prabhu.
One last thing. If you read the conversation books, the last ones when Tamal was taking care of Prabhupada, it is absolutely perfectly clear how much Tamal loved Srila Prabhupada.
Yes.
I wasn't personally there, but I was there in the sense that I read those last couple of books, and it is completely clear that his heart was 100% full of love for Prabhupada.
Yes. Yeah, he brought that TKG's diary out as a reply to, you know, some very vociferous criticism that he was receiving, you know, from people, frankly, who should have known better. And he was persuaded to do that, to publish it, because his intention was not to publish, actually. Just after Prabhupada's, well, let's see, all right, March 1977, I'd been keeping my diary for about a year and a half. And initially I'd started keeping it just as a personal memento. But then after a few months I realized this is history in the making. This is a historical document. So I kept it very religiously, let's say. Every day at least I was writing something, and we were recording everything that we possibly could. So in 77, when I left the party, on the day that I left, I had a sudden realization that now who's going to keep on recording all these intimate exchanges that go on in Prabhupada's room, which are not being captured, you know, on the recorder. And so I went to Tamal and I told him, I've been keeping this diary, now I'm leaving, so you should keep a diary now that you're the permanent secretary. So initially he was dismissive. He said, no, I'm too busy, I've got so much to do, you know, like this. So I insisted. I said, no, Maharaj, I said, you have to do this. I said, there's so many years of Prabhupada's travels. We know nothing about what happened, you know, on a day-to-day basis. Shrudakirti didn't keep a journal. Nanda Kumar didn't keep a journal. Satsvarup Maharaj did. He was one of the few. But he was only there for short periods. So I said, we've lost so much information about Prabhupada's activities because it wasn't recorded. I said, you have to do this. So, oh, well, maybe. But he wouldn't commit himself. So that was mid-March. You'll see that TKG's diary begins from, I think, about April the 18th or 19th. So there was about a month's gap. And then he had a realization, you know, that there was a lot of nectar that was not being recorded and that he should write it down. So he kept his diary. But then after Prabhupada's disappearance, we were here in Vrindavan, and one day Tamal asked me, what are you going to do with your diary? So I said, well, I'm going to publish it. So he said, no, why? So I said, well, you know, we had a privilege to be with Prabhupada, but it's not like we're any more special than any other devotee. What we know, you know, the exchanges that we had, that should be shared as much as possible so other devotees can have the same experiences that we had. So he accepted that. Then I asked him, what are you going to do with your diary? He said, I'm not going to publish it. So I said, no, why? And then he said, well, there's a lot of intimate exchanges there, and they're not necessarily things that you would want to go out in public. So I said, well, okay, but you know, those things you can maybe just not put in, or you know, just express them in a slightly different way. But I said, you got to share what you've got. So he said, he accepted the argument, but he said, I'm not going to publish my diary until you've published all of yours. So of course, you know, if he'd have done that, then we would have been in real trouble, because I'm still trying to get my diary completed. I got another 2 volumes yet. But fortunately for us, in the late 90s, because of this whole, you know, poison theory and whatever, and all the blame or nasty things that were being said about Tamal, and you know, what was motivating him or whatever, Ravindra Swarup Prabhu persuaded him that, you know, your answer to these critics is to publish this diary. He'd read it, you know, and he said, you know, you've got to publish it. That will seal a lot of people's lips. So he did. So, you know, as you say, when you read Tamal's diary, the exchanges, some of the exchanges that are described there are very, very intimate. And you can't help but conclude that this is a man who was in love with his spiritual master. So, you know, it's a good job that he got that out, because, as I say, if he was waiting for me, then, you know, it would never have been published. All right. Another question or comment? Nobody? Huh?
Time for Damodars to come.
6, yes. What time are we supposed to finish? 6:30?
6:36.
All right, so it's time. So I'm sorry I lost track on that one point there. If I hear the recording, I'll pick it up again. But anyway, what can be done? That's the reality of material existence, unfortunately, nowadays. But thank you all very much for coming. I hope that you've been able to, you know, get a little bit more deeply into the nectar of Prabhupada's activities and pastimes with his disciples. So thank you all very much. Srila Prabhupada.